Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at a movie that I actually watched last month, and I was this close to including it in the What Else I Saw video, but the more I thought about it as I was preparing my review, the more I felt it deserved its own video. So here you go. Our subject is a British film from 1965 that goes by a few different titles. You may hear it referred to as The Nightcaller, or Nightcaller from Outer Space, or Blood Beast from Outer Space. The Nightcaller sounds the most mysterious and intriguing, but it is kind of generic, and it does make me think the movie's going to be about a stalker or a babysitter getting creepy phone calls. Seen that movie. So I'm not sure it's the most apt title. Blood Beast from Outer Space, on the other hand, I think goes too far in the opposite direction. It suggests something lurid and pulpy, which this movie isn't, so I would call that a misnomer as well. That leaves us with Nightcaller from Outer Space, which I guess is the best middle ground. Three scientists detect a large object approaching Earth, not burning up as it enters the atmosphere and heading straight toward London. The two men travel to the estimated touchdown spot, only to find the military has beaten them there. Although the major in charge is inclined to deny all, he finally agrees to bring them to the only thing that seems to have landed, a sphere of peculiar properties. The scientists take the sphere back to the lab and start studying it, but the situation alters drastically when it becomes apparent the sphere isn't the only strange thing to have arrived on Earth. This was a great little film, I thought. A lower budget production, but better than some, better than most, I would say, and better than some of its promotional material might suggest. Thankfully, I wasn't exposed to any of that because this was recommended to me by someone I trust, and I just went ahead and watched it on YouTube. I would suggest that if at any point while watching this video the movie sounds interesting to you, you should do the same. Just watch it without doing any preliminary research, because some of the blurbs out there kind of say too much. I would describe The Nightcaller as a happy combination of engaging filmmaking, a spooky story, and a striking cast of characters. American John Saxon stars. You may recognize him from his plethora of appearances as good and bad guys in horror movies. He had a long career, starting with early success as a teen idol before branching out into genre films like this one, stateside and overseas. Playing the elder scientist is Maurice Denham, who was also prolific, though I've only caught a few movies he was in. They are assisted by Patricia Haynes, whose character is a very cool customer, brandishing a fascinating beehive do and a dry wit. Joining them is John Carson as the Major, a character I found rather likable, even if the scientists find his interference an irritation. Like many of these actors, he seemed vaguely familiar to me, but it turns out I've only seen a few of his old horror films, and I don't remember him in them. I did find out, though, that he played Mr. Knightley in the 1972 adaptation of Emma. That's interesting. I've actually already gone and looked that up on YouTube and watched, a significant portion of it. Not that I liked him like that. He made a positive impression on me in this movie, but I wasn't like, woo! I gotta be careful about what I say here, because sometimes I say something in these videos and people just run away with it, and it's like, whoa! Pump the brakes. I don't have a crush on this guy. I'm just saying, I really liked him here. But I was very curious to see what his performance as my favorite Austen hero would be like. So, yeah, I clicked through this Emma adaptation and watched as many of his scenes as I could. And, it's pretty good. You know, it's not a very romantic adaptation, and certainly not one of the more romantic Mr. Knightleys. And he's no Jeremy Northam, but I enjoyed his performance, and so, if my mom's watching this, which she probably is, she's gonna be really disappointed that I went ahead and just watched a whole chunk of this movie without her. I'm sorry, Mom! We'll watch it in full together, and then I'll review it. Anyway, back to the movie that we're reviewing today. The Scotland Yard superintendent who joins the party halfway through the film is played by Alfred Burke. His character also brings a cool head and a very dry sense of humor to the proceedings. I'm not sure it's right to call it a sense of humor. He's not really funny, he's not trying to be funny, but some of the things he says are humorous. There are lots of dry, matter-of-fact characters here. As for the eponymous Nightcaller, I applaud director John Gilling for most of his choices regarding that character. Later known as Medra, he is a tall, dark, shadowy figure who exudes sinister intent, though multiple characters make sure to mention that he does have a nice voice. That voice belongs to Robert Rietti, while Robert Crutzen plays the role on screen. John Gilling, who also directed 1956's The Gamma People, made the wise decision to not show too much, keeping this strange visitor in the dark for the brunt of the film. There are two exceptions. One is that we get a few glimpses of a deformed hand, and unfortunately this thick, rubbery glove looks like part of a Halloween costume you might find at the party store, so it has the potential to detract from the mystery and horror. The other exception I'll get to in a couple minutes. Like I said, the Nightcaller, or Nightcaller from Outer Space, I just realized that I keep referring to it as the Nightcaller. I guess I really do prefer that title. The Nightcaller does have a spooky story. Its screenplay was written by Jim O'Connelly, based on Frank Crisp's 1963 novel, which I'd say is long out of print. O'Connelly wrote the screenplays for a dozen films, all of them horror movies and thrillers, but he seems to be known more for producing and directing. One of his last directorial efforts was 1969's The Valley of Gwangi, which I reviewed last year. This film does have lower ratings across the board on all the platforms on which you can rate movies, and honestly, I don't know why. I thought it was very good. I thought it had good suspense, exciting bursts of action, creepy vibes. It utilizes lighting and Dutch angles in a clever way. A lot is communicated through camera movement and audio. There's at least one flashback thrown in to shake things up, and while the pace is on the slower side, it's steady and tense. Maybe they don't like some of the film's quirkier elements, like the fact that the cold open is interrupted by a man's voice singing the title song, a schmaltzy little ditty which would sound more appropriate in a smoky lounge were it not for the lyrics, which I guess do fit the plot. The song, which is exclusive to the international version, sticks out in a big way, especially given that otherwise the movie is very careful with its music. It's almost stingy. But if you don't like the song, the good news is that it's short and you'll probably forget about it by the time the story gets rolling. Something else that's quirky, but that really made the movie for me, was the inclusion of some amusing character interactions. There's the scene where the Major and the senior scientist are trying to brief Whitehall over the phone, struggling to communicate the technical jargon and getting more exasperated by the second. There's the Scotland Yard superintendent's interview of Marge and Reg, two concerned parents who have valuable information but aren't very good storytellers. They talk over each other, repeat each other, bring up irrelevant details, and have quiet little disagreements. And there's the superintendent's interrogation of a bizarre, passive-aggressive little creep operating a sketchy business in Soho. What an interesting scene that was! I loved that these moments made the cut. The film could have done without them, but it would have been worse off because these characters add dimension and color, and the interactions add a touch of realism and humanity. The Nightcaller does have some surprises. For one thing, it switches partway through from a scientific study and military operation to a missing persons investigation. For another thing, there are some startling deaths. Startling because I didn't see them coming, and also startling because, in one instance, it was quite brutal. I won't say more about that, but it did throw me for a loop a couple of times. And lastly, we have the ending. Spoiler, go to this timestamp if you don't want to hear my thoughts on the ending. I considered not talking about this, but I just gotta throw my thoughts out there. I wasn't happy with the conclusion, and at first I thought it was because it was anticlimactic and kind of soft, but the more I considered it, the more I felt the ending was just plain wrong. I do give them credit for doing something different. There's no big battle with troops deployed to the area and tanks rolling in and all that jazz. I've seen that plenty of times before, so this alternative resolution was a twist. But it bugged me. The narrative takes a familiar turn. It's revealed that the alien comes from a dying race and he's been abducting young, attractive Earth women to bring them back home and hopefully save his species by repopulating it with healthy offspring. I don't have an issue with that, even though, well, it's very similar to what was going on in the Mysterians, which I just talked about a couple weeks ago. That's not my issue. My issue is that he explains all this in a final confrontation, and they just let him go with 20-something Earth women who I don't necessarily believe knew what they were in for, gave their consent to this sacrificial expedition into space. I'm not sure they could have stopped him. He leaves very quickly with a bang and a whoosh. But they didn't even make an effort to move in. And John Saxon, as they're off into space, even wishes him well! What?! Medra promises that no harm will come to these women, but why would you take his word for it? He's a vicious killer who has murdered people. Murdered people because they were too intelligent for him to control. That is definitely not someone I would trust. I'm not saying it was a bad ending. It was unexpected and even interesting in its own way, but it wasn't satisfying. However, that was the only thing I had an issue with. Otherwise, I was very pleased, and I enjoyed the movie a lot. One last note, with this being a 1965 picture, it is a little unusual that it wasn't filmed in color. Color may have been more snazzy. They could have gone the Hammer horror route and splashed some bright red blood on the screen. But I'm not sure they had the budget to pull off good color, and frankly, I don't think the movie needs it. I'm not sure it would have looked as fresh and appealing to me if it weren't in black and white. I believe there is a somewhat recent colorized version floating around out there. You can watch whatever you want to watch, but I'm telling you, please don't watch the colorized version instead of this crisp black and white. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope you'll check out the movie if it sounds like something you'd like, and then, if you want to, you can come back and share your thoughts on it. I'll see you next week with another video. Thanks for watching.